Susan Whitmore was on her feet, pointing with a trembling finger, her voice cracking with desperation. "We gave birth to him. We have rights." Every head turned toward the defendant's table, where 28-year-old tech billionaire Elijah Roman sat frozen, his usually confident demeanor completely shattered. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as he stared at the middle-aged white couple claiming to be his family. "We were just kids," Brad Whitmore shouted, rising beside his wife. "We didn't know what else to do. We were scared." The tension was suffocating. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters scribbled frantically. At the defendant's table, an elegant black woman in her 70s reached over and gently placed her hand on Elijah's trembling shoulder. Veronica Roman, the billionaire philanthropist who had raised him. Judge Patricia Hernandez slammed her gavel 3 times. "Order! Order in this courtroom!" The chaos quieted to a deadly silence. All eyes focused on the young man at the center of it all, the abandoned autistic boy who had become one of the most successful tech innovators of his generation. Judge Hernandez looked directly at him, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Roman, do you recognize these people?" Elijah's jaw tightened. His eyes moved between the desperate couple and the woman who had been his anchor for 27 years. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor. According to DNA tests, they are my biological parents." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Elijah closed his eyes, bracing himself as he began to recount the story that would define everything that followed. 27 years earlier, the December rain fell in icy sheets across downtown Detroit, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and broken dreams. In a modest apartment on the city's east side, 19-year-old Susan clutched her swollen belly, tears streaming down her face as contractions racked her body. "I can't do this, Brad," she sobbed to her boyfriend, who paced the tiny living room like a caged animal. "The doctors said something's wrong with him, that he might be different." Brad Whitmore, barely 20 himself, ran his hands through his unwashed hair. They had no insurance, no money, and no family support. When the prenatal tests suggested developmental delays, their fragile world had collapsed entirely. "We're just kids ourselves, Susie," he whispered, but his words offered no comfort. Hours later, their son was born in the back of an ambulance racing to Detroit General Hospital. The baby didn't cry, not once. He lay still and quiet, his dark eyes seeming to take in everything and nothing at once. The medical team exchanged worried glances. The newborn displayed several early markers consistent with autism spectrum disorder. For 3 days, Brad and Susan sat by the hospital bassinet, watching their son's tiny chest rise and fall. He never made eye contact. He didn't respond to their voices. When they tried to hold him, he seemed to retreat into himself, as if the very touch of human contact was overwhelming. On the 4th day, they made a decision that would haunt them forever. They waited until the winter night was at its coldest, then bundled their son in a thin blue blanket. Behind the Sacred Heart Children's Shelter, they placed the bundle on the back steps, protected from the rain, but exposed to the brutal December cold. Susan scribbled a note with shaking hands. "We can't do this anymore. He's broken. Find him someone who can fix him." She kissed her son's forehead once, her tears falling onto his peaceful face. "Maybe someone who knows how to help him will find him," she whispered. They walked away into the darkness and didn't look back. Marcus Johnson, a kind-hearted man, had worked as a maintenance supervisor at Sacred Heart for 15 years. He'd seen it all. Children dropped off by overwhelmed parents, teens aging out of the system, babies left by mothers too young or too poor to care for them. But when he arrived for his 6 a.m. shift and found the small bundle on the steps, something broke inside his chest. The baby was hypothermic, but alive. Marcus wrapped him in his own coat and called 911, staying with the infant until the paramedics arrived. As they loaded the baby into the ambulance, Marcus found the crumpled note that had fallen from the blanket. "We can't do this. Sorry." 4 words that would define this child's early years. At the hospital, doctors stabilized the infant and confirmed what the note had suggested. He showed signs of autism spectrum disorder. He didn't cry, rarely made eye contact, and seemed hypersensitive to light and sound. Social workers placed him in the Sacred Heart system under the temporary name Baby Doe. For months, the infant lived in the shelter's special needs wing. Caseworkers noted that he was intelligent. His eyes tracked movement with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural, but he remained nonverbal and seemed to exist in his own private world. The reality was far worse than anyone imagined. Staff members, overwhelmed and undertrained, often left him alone for hours when he had meltdowns. "He's too difficult," they would mutter, stepping over him when he rocked back and forth on the floor, seeking comfort from his own movements. One particularly cruel day shift worker, Mrs. Henderson, would snap her fingers aggressively near his face when he didn't respond to her calls. "See? Nothing there," she'd tell visiting families. "This one's a lost cause." Potential adoptive families would visit, spend a few minutes observing his unusual behaviors, and quietly request to see other children. "We want a normal child," they'd whisper to caseworkers. "One who can love us back." By his first birthday, the boy had been passed over 47 times. But what happened next would change his life forever. The billionaire's heart. Veronica Roman had built her fortune from nothing. The daughter of a Detroit factory worker, she had coded her first program at age 12 on a borrowed computer. By 30, she had sold her first tech company for $200 million. By 40, she was a billionaire, her innovations in cloud computing and AI making her one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley. But success had come with a price. Her beloved nephew Caleb, who had autism, passed away at 8. That loss transformed Veronica's life. She channeled her grief into helping children like him. Every month, she visited shelters and care facilities, not for photo opportunities or tax write-offs, but because these children reminded her of Caleb's beautiful, complex mind. On a gray February morning, Veronica walked through the corridors of Sacred Heart for the first time. The director, Sister Mary Catherine, guided her past playrooms full of laughing children toward the quiet wing where the special needs kids lived. "We have some remarkable children here," Sister Mary Catherine explained. "But I want you to meet someone special. He's been with us for 14 months now and—" She paused. "Well, he's extraordinary." They stopped outside a small room where a toddler sat alone on the floor, completely absorbed in arranging colored blocks in complex geometric patterns. His movements were precise, methodical, almost ritualistic. He had created a structure that looked like it required advanced mathematical understanding. "His name is Baby Doe," Sister Mary Catherine whispered. "He was abandoned as an infant. He doesn't speak, but watch his eyes." Veronica knelt by the doorway and observed. The child's dark eyes held a depth of intelligence that took her breath away. Something about the way he arranged the blocks, the complete focus in his gaze, reminded her powerfully of Caleb. "Has anyone tried to adopt him?" Veronica asked. Sister Mary Catherine's face fell. "Many families have considered him, but autism can be challenging. Most people want guarantees about a child's future, and with special needs children, there are no guarantees." Veronica watched as the boy completed his block structure, a perfect spiral that seemed to follow mathematical principles she recognized from her computer science background. When he finished, he looked up for just a moment, and their eyes met. In that instant, Veronica knew. "I'd like to begin the adoption process," she said quietly. Sister Mary Catherine stared at her. "Mrs. Roman, are you certain? He may never speak. He may never—" "He may never what?" Veronica interrupted gently. "He may never be normal? Sister, I'm not looking for normal. I'm looking for extraordinary. And this child is extraordinary. If you believe every child deserves to be seen as extraordinary, hit that like button. It helps this message reach someone who needs it." The legal process took 6 months. During that time, Veronica visited the boy every day, slowly building trust and connection. She learned that he responded to soft music, that he could spend hours working with numbers and patterns, and that while he didn't speak, he understood everything. She brought him puzzles, coding toys, and mathematical games. She sat with him in comfortable silence, letting him know through her presence that he was valued exactly as he was. Gradually, he began to tolerate her touch, then seemed to welcome it. When the adoption was finalized, Veronica gave him a name that reflected her hopes for his future. Elijah, meaning "My God is Yahweh," a name that spoke to answered prayers and divine purpose. On the day she brought him home to her Malibu estate, Veronica knelt down to his eye level in the marble foyer. "Elijah," she said softly, "I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are not less than anyone else. Your mind works differently, and that makes you special. I will never give up on you, never stop believing in you, and never let you believe that you are anything less than perfect, exactly as you are." Elijah didn't respond verbally, but he reached out and touched her face with his small hand, the first time he had ever initiated physical contact with another human being. Raising Elijah required patience, resources, and unconditional love. Veronica assembled a team of the world's best autism specialists, speech therapists, and educational experts. But more importantly, she gave him something he had never had: a home where he was wanted. Elijah didn't speak his first word until he was 4 years old. The word was Mom, and he said it while Veronica was reading him a book about numbers. She cried for an hour. By age 7, it became clear that behind his autistic behaviors lay a remarkable intellect. Elijah could perform complex mathematical calculations in his head, understood programming concepts that baffled college students, and had an intuitive grasp of pattern recognition that amazed his tutors. But his biggest test came when he turned 12. The prestigious Preston Academy had initially accepted Elijah based on his exceptional test scores. But when he showed up for his first day, everything went wrong. The cafeteria was too loud. The fluorescent lights felt like knives against his skin. When a teacher tried to force him to make eye contact during roll call, he had a complete meltdown in front of 200 students. Within hours, the school called Veronica. "Mrs. Roman, we think there's been a mistake. Your son isn't suitable for our environment. Perhaps a special needs facility would be more appropriate." That night, Elijah locked himself in his room, convinced he was a failure. Veronica found him rocking back and forth, just like he had as a baby at Sacred Heart. Everyone expected her to find him a special school, until she opened her mouth. "Elijah," she said, sitting on the floor beside him, "tomorrow we're going to march back into that school together, and you're going to show them that different doesn't mean less than." She spent the next 6 hours on the phone with lawyers, disability advocates, and the school board. By morning, Preston Academy had agreed to provide accommodations, noise-canceling headphones, scheduled breaks, and a quiet space for when the neurotypical world became overwhelming. But more importantly, Veronica had shown Elijah something that would define the rest of his life. When the world tries to diminish you, you fight back, not with anger, but with excellence. 3 years later, Elijah graduated as valedictorian. But it was his 8th birthday that had changed everything. Veronica had planned a quiet celebration, knowing the crowds and noise overwhelmed him. As she placed his cake on the table, Elijah suddenly spoke in full sentences for the first time. "Mom," he said, his voice clear and thoughtful, "I know I'm different. I know my brain works differently than other kids. But I want you to know that I understand everything you've done for me. And I love you." Veronica set down the cake and pulled him into her arms, both of them crying. She thought she'd never hear that word from a child of her own, until he called her the one thing she'd dreamed of hearing since Caleb died. "Mom." "I love you too, Elijah," she whispered. "More than you'll ever know." If this part moved you like it moved us, tap the subscribe button. We tell stories that remind the world what real love looks like. As he grew older, Elijah's gifts became more apparent. He could write code like poetry, see patterns in data that others missed, and had an almost supernatural ability to understand how technology could solve human problems. But more than his intellectual gifts, he had developed empathy and compassion, traits that many assumed autistic children couldn't possess. At 17, while still finishing high school, Elijah created his first major innovation, an AI-powered communication app called Speak Easy that helped nonverbal children express themselves through symbols, sounds, and predictive text. The app went viral within weeks, downloaded by millions of families worldwide. "I built this because I remember what it was like to have so much to say, but no way to say it," Elijah explained in his first major interview with Forbes magazine. Every nonverbal child has a universe inside their mind. They just need the right tools to share it with the world. The success of Speak Easy led to other innovations. By age 25, Elijah had founded Roman Technologies, a company that developed technology empowering thousands of neurodiverse individuals to find their voice, learn, and thrive. Through it all, Veronica remained his anchor and inspiration. In every interview, every speech, every moment of triumph, Elijah made it clear that his success began with one woman's decision to see potential where others saw problems. "My mother taught me that being different isn't a disability," he would say. It's a superpower waiting to be discovered. On his 26th birthday, Elijah got a tattoo on his forearm. You didn't throw me away. Below it was a date, the day Veronica adopted him. At 28, he was no longer the abandoned infant left on shelter steps. He was worth $500 million, employed over 3,000 people, 60% of whom were neurodivergent, and had been named one of Time magazine's most influential people under 30. His foundation provided scholarships for special needs children and funded autism research worldwide. He lived quietly in a Palo Alto home designed specifically for his sensory needs, soft lighting, noise-controlled rooms, and spaces where he could retreat when the neurotypical world became overwhelming. Veronica, now 72, lived in the guest house next door, still his closest confidant and advisor. One day, a cease and desist letter arrived at his Palo Alto office. The return address showed a law firm in Detroit, Whitmore and Associates. Inside was a legal document that made his blood run cold. Dear Mr. Roman, we represent Brad and Susan Whitmore, your biological parents. Our clients have recently become aware of your success and public profile. They wish to establish contact and build a relationship with their son. Our clients want you to know they were forced to make their difficult decision 28 years ago. They were young, poor, and facing an impossible situation with no family support. They have spent decades regretting their choice and believe they deserve the opportunity to explain themselves and be part of your life. We are requesting that you agree to meet with our clients within 30 days. If you refuse, we will be forced to pursue legal action to establish their parental rights and ensure access to their biological son. The Whitmores are not asking for money. They're asking for acknowledgement. Don't they deserve to be recognized as the people who gave you life? Sincerely, Jennifer Whitmore, Esquire, daughter of Brad and Susan Whitmore. Elijah read the letter 3 times before his hands stopped shaking enough to call Veronica. She arrived within minutes, her face grave, as she reviewed the legal document. They can't do this, she said quietly. You're an adult. You choose your family. But their lawyer, David Chen, wasn't so optimistic. Actually, this is more complex than it appears. They're not just asking for contact. They're claiming that the original adoption was legally questionable because parental rights were never formally terminated. If they can prove they never formally relinquished their rights, they might have legal standing. Within a week, the story broke in the media. The Whitmores had given an exclusive interview to a major network, appearing as a reformed couple who had been forced to make an impossible choice and now wanted to reclaim their relationship with their successful son. Susan Whitmore, now 47 and a real estate agent in suburban Detroit, cried on camera as she explained their decision. We were just kids. I was 19. Brad was 20. We had no money, no support, and the doctors told us our baby would need special care we couldn't provide. We were forced to give him up. We had no choice. Brad Whitmore, now a construction supervisor, added with calculated emotion, We've regretted it every day for 28 years. When we saw him on TV, saw what an amazing man he's become, we knew we had to try. We gave him life. Don't we deserve recognition for that? Don't we deserve to be called his parents? The interview was carefully orchestrated to portray them not as people who abandoned a disabled child, but as young parents who made a selfless sacrifice to ensure their son had better opportunities. They conveniently never mentioned the word autism in the entire interview. But what they didn't know was that Veronica had kept something from that December night 28 years ago, something that would destroy their carefully crafted narrative. Everyone expected this to be a story about forgiveness and second chances, until she opened her mouth. Public opinion was divided. Some people sympathized with the Whitmores, believing everyone deserved second chances. Others were outraged that they would disturb Elijah's life after abandoning him as an infant. But what hurt Elijah most was that they never once mentioned his autism in the interview. They spoke about his success, his wealth, his fame, but they completely ignored the reality of the special needs child they had abandoned. The case became a media sensation. Billionaire's biological parents' demand reunion dominated headlines for weeks. Legal experts debated the complex questions of parental rights, abandoned children, and the statute of limitations on family claims. The Whitmore's lawyer argued that her clients had never formally terminated their parental rights, making the adoption technically incomplete. She claimed they had been young and scared, but that their biological connection to Elijah gave them inherent rights that couldn't be erased by time or circumstances. Veronica's legal team countered that the Whitmores had clearly abandoned their child with intent to permanently relinquish custody. The note they left, combined with their 28-year absence from Elijah's life, constituted clear abandonment under Michigan law. But the most painful part for Elijah was the DNA test. Despite knowing the results would confirm what everyone already knew, being forced to provide biological proof that these strangers were his parents felt like a violation. The test results were unambiguous. Brad and Susan Whitmore were indeed Elijah's biological parents. Armed with this evidence, the Whitmores' legal team filed a motion demanding court-ordered visitation rights and official recognition as Elijah's legal family. They claimed that Elijah's autism had been overcome by his success, proving they had made the right choice in placing him with someone who could help him reach his potential. "Our clients always believed their son was special," their lawyer told the court. "They placed him with Mrs. Roman not out of rejection, but out of love, knowing she could provide opportunities they couldn't. Now that he's proven his extraordinary abilities, they simply want to be part of his life." Judge Patricia Hernandez had been on the bench for 20 years and had seen every kind of family dispute imaginable. But the Roman case was unlike anything in her experience. The courtroom was packed with media, disability rights advocates, and members of the autism community who had come to support Elijah. The Whitmores testified first, their lawyer painting them as reformed individuals who had spent decades regretting their forced decision. Susan cried as she described the pain of living without her son, while Brad spoke about his pride in Elijah's achievements. "We know we can't change the past," Susan said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "But we were forced into an impossible situation. We had no choice but to find him a better home. We're not the same scared kids we were 28 years ago. We're successful, stable, and ready to be the parents Elijah deserved all along." Their daughter Jennifer, now 25 and a lawyer herself, testified about growing up knowing she had a brother somewhere in the world. "My parents never forgot Elijah," she said. "They talked about him constantly, wondered how he was doing, prayed he was safe. They deserve the chance to show him they love him." The testimony was emotional and carefully orchestrated to generate sympathy. The Whitmores had clearly spent months preparing, crafting a narrative of forced abandonment and decades of regret. But then Veronica's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that directly contradicts the plaintiff's claims about being forced to abandon their child." She walked to the evidence table and picked up a small yellowed piece of paper. "This is the original note left with baby Elijah on December 15, 1996. The courtroom fell silent as she read aloud, "We can't do this anymore. He's broken. Find him someone who can fix him." That line hit everyone in that courtroom like a sledgehammer. Susan Whitmore's face went white. Brad stared at the floor. Their carefully constructed narrative of loving sacrifice crumbled in an instant. But when it was time for Elijah to testify, the courtroom atmosphere changed completely. Elijah took the stand wearing a simple black suit, his hands folded calmly in his lap. Judge Hernandez looked at him with respect and compassion. "Mr. Roman," she said gently, "this court recognizes that you are an adult capable of making your own decisions about family relationships. However, the plaintiffs claim biological and legal rights that may supersede your personal preferences. I'd like you to tell this court, in your own words, how you feel about their request." Elijah was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "Your Honor, I want to start by addressing something that's bothered me throughout this entire process. The plaintiffs have spent considerable time talking about my success, my wealth, my achievements. They've used words like pride and potential and extraordinary abilities. But they haven't mentioned the word autism once in their testimony. They haven't acknowledged that I am still autistic, that I still struggle with sensory overload, that I still need accommodations and understanding. They seem to believe that my success has somehow cured me of the disability that made them abandon me in the first place. I want this court to understand something. I am not successful despite being autistic. I am successful because of the people who love me exactly as I am, autism and all." He paused, looking directly at Veronica, who sat in the front row with tears streaming down her face. "Family isn't determined by DNA," Elijah continued. "Family is determined by who shows up. It's determined by who sits with you during meltdowns, who learns your communication style, who advocates for you when the world doesn't understand. When I was nonverbal for years, my mother talked to me anyway, believing I could understand even when I couldn't respond. When I had sensory meltdowns that lasted for hours, she held me through them, never making me feel like I was broken or wrong. When the world told her I would never achieve anything, she saw potential where others saw problems. The people who gave me life abandoned me on a cold December night because they couldn't handle my autism. The woman who chose to be my mother has spent 27 years proving that love is stronger than fear, that family is built through daily acts of care and commitment, not biological accidents. The courtroom was completely silent. Several people in the gallery were openly crying. Elijah's voice grew stronger. Your Honor, these people left me to die because I was inconvenient to them. They're here now because I'm profitable to them. That's not family. That's opportunism. My mother taught me that I have value not because of what I can produce or achieve, but because of who I am. She taught me that being different isn't something to be ashamed of or overcome, but something to be celebrated and nurtured. The plaintiffs claim they always knew I was special. But if that were true, they would have stayed and helped me discover my potential instead of abandoning me and hoping someone else would deal with the challenges. They came back for the successful man. My mother stayed for the vulnerable child. That's the difference between biology and family. He looked directly at Brad and Susan Whitmore, who were both staring at the floor. I don't hate you, he said quietly. I understand you were young and scared. But understanding your reasons doesn't create an obligation for relationship. You made your choice 28 years ago. I'm making mine now. I choose the family that chose me. Judge Hernandez deliberated for less than an hour. When she returned to the bench, her expression was grave but determined. This court has heard emotional testimony from all parties, she began. The plaintiffs have argued the biological connection creates inherent rights and obligations that transcend time and circumstances. They've presented themselves as reformed individuals who deserve a second chance with their biological son. However, this court must consider not just the rights of biological parents, but the rights of children, even adult children, to be free from harmful or unwanted relationships. The evidence clearly shows that the plaintiffs abandoned their infant son with no intention of maintaining contact or providing support. The note they left, "We can't do this, sorry," constitutes clear and unambiguous abandonment under Michigan law. More importantly, their current interest in establishing a relationship appears to be motivated primarily by Mr. Roman's success and public profile, not by genuine parental love or concern for his well-being. The court notes that throughout their testimony, the plaintiffs consistently failed to acknowledge or address Mr. Roman's autism, instead focusing exclusively on his achievements. This suggests they still cannot accept him as he truly is, but only as they wish he were. In contrast, the evidence shows that Ms. Veronica Roman has provided 27 years of consistent, loving, supportive parenting. She adopted Mr. Roman knowing he had special needs, and she has dedicated her life to ensuring he had every opportunity to thrive while accepting him exactly as he is. Therefore, this court finds that the plaintiffs have no legal standing to demand visitation or recognition as Mr. Roman's family. Their biological connection does not supersede the legal and emotional family relationships Mr. Roman has chosen to maintain. Furthermore, this court strongly rebukes the plaintiffs for attempting to use the legal system to force their way into the life of a person who has clearly expressed his desire for no contact. Their actions show a concerning disregard for Mr. Roman's autonomy and emotional well-being. The plaintiff's motion is denied in its entirety. Mr. Roman, you are free to define your own family relationships without interference from this court or anyone else. The courtroom erupted in applause. Elijah immediately stood and embraced Veronica, both of them crying with relief. The Whitmores sat in stunned silence as their lawyer gathered her papers. As they prepared to leave, Susan Whitmore made one last desperate attempt to approach Elijah. "Elijah, please," she called out. "Just give us one chance. We're your real parents." Elijah turned to face her, his expression calm but firm. "No," he said quietly. "You're the people who gave birth to me. My real parent is the woman who raised me. If you believe real family is chosen, not just born, share this story. Let's spread a message the world desperately needs." 6 months after the trial, Elijah Roman stood before 2,000 attendees at the International Autism Innovation Conference, delivering the keynote address on redefining success in the neurodivergent community. Next to him on the stage sat Veronica, now 73, still his closest advisor and biggest supporter. Success isn't measured by how well we conform to neurotypical expectations, Elijah told the audience. Success is measured by how fully we're able to be ourselves, and how effectively we can contribute our unique gifts to the world. But none of us achieve success alone. We succeed because of the people who see our potential when we can't see it ourselves, who support us through our struggles, and who love us not despite our differences, but because of them. I am autistic. I will always be autistic. And I am grateful for that, because my autism has given me the ability to see patterns others miss, to think in ways others can't, and to create solutions for problems others don't even notice. But my autism also came with challenges. I was nonverbal for years. I had daily meltdowns. I struggled with sensory issues that made the world feel overwhelming and hostile. I needed specialized support, endless patience, and unconditional love. I received all of that from one person, my mother, Veronica Roman. She didn't just love me despite my autism. She loved me because I was her son, autism and all. He paused, looking out at the audience filled with autistic individuals, parents, caregivers, and advocates. Some of you are here because you're autistic and wondering if you'll ever be accepted for who you are. Some of you are here because you're parents of autistic children, wondering if you'll ever understand how to help them thrive. And some of you are here because you work with autistic individuals and want to better support them. I have one message for all of you. Love is what shows up, not what promises to show up. Not what shows up when it's convenient or profitable. Love is what shows up on the hardest days, in the darkest moments, when there's no guarantee of success or recognition. Family isn't about DNA or biology. Family is about choice, commitment, and unconditional acceptance. Family is about seeing someone's potential when the rest of the world sees problems. My biological parents abandoned me because they couldn't handle my autism. My chosen mother embraced me because of who I was, exactly as I was. That's the difference between people who share your genetics and people who choose to be your family. To the parents here, your autistic children don't need you to fix them or make them normal. They need you to love them, support them, and help them discover their own unique gifts. They need you to show up every day, whether they're having a good day or a meltdown. To the autistic individuals here, you are not broken. You are not less than. You are different, and that difference is a strength. Find the people who see your value, who support your dreams, and who love you exactly as you are. Those are your real family. And to everyone here, remember that the most important relationships in our lives aren't the ones we're born into, but the ones we choose and nurture. Love is what shows up, not what returns when it's convenient. The standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes. After the conference, Elijah and Veronica sat on the terrace of their hotel, looking out at the city lights below. "I'm proud of you," Veronica said quietly. "Not because of your success or your achievements, but because of the man you've become. You've turned your pain into purpose, your struggles into strength." Elijah reached over and took her hand. Real parents don't claim credit. They give it. They step back and let their children shine. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the city humming quietly below them. 3 months later, Elijah opened the doors to the Caleb Memorial Center for Neurodivergent Excellence, named after Veronica's nephew, who had first inspired her to work with special needs children. The center provided educational support, job training, and social services for autistic individuals and their families. Carved into the marble wall of the entrance lobby were the words that had become the foundation's guiding principle. Love is what shows up, not what returns. Below that inscription was a smaller plaque that read, "In memory of Caleb Roman, 2010 to 2018, and in honor of all the children who need someone to show up." Dedicated by Elijah Roman and his mother, Veronica Roman. Proof that family is built by choice, commitment, and unconditional love. On opening day, as hundreds of families toured the facility, Elijah stood with his arm around Veronica, watching autistic children explore sensory-friendly learning spaces designed specifically for their needs. "They came back for the man," Veronica said softly, repeating the words that had become shorthand for their story. "But you stayed for the boy." Elijah shook his head. "No, Mom. You stayed for the boy. I'm just trying to pay that forward." In the end, that was perhaps the most important lesson of all. that love isn't measured by who shows up at the moment of triumph, but by who shows up in the moments of need. It's not about claiming credit for success, but about providing support through struggle. It's not about biology or blood, but about choice and commitment and the daily decision to see potential where others see problems. The Whitmores had returned for the successful man they read about in magazines. But Veronica had stayed for the vulnerable child who couldn't speak, couldn't connect, couldn't promise anything except the possibility that with enough love and patience, he might someday find his way in the world. That difference, between showing up for success and showing up for struggle, was the difference between people who share your DNA and people who choose to be your family. And in a world that often fails to understand or support neurodivergent individuals, that difference means everything. If any moment in Elijah's journey touched your heart,